Many women, through the process of playing with others' emotions or being played with, have contributed to the staggering number of over 100 million single women in China today. People often point out that there are over 30 million more single men than women in the country. So why, then, are there still close to 100 million single women? Opinions on this issue vary widely, but personally, I believe the rise of extreme feminism in recent years plays a significant role. Let me share my perspective, and you can decide if you agree. Extreme feminism often promotes the idea that modern women must strive for so-called independence and freedom. While these ideals may seem empowering on the surface, they have unintentionally led to a weakening of traditional views on love, marriage, and family. As a result, behaviors like infidelity, marital betrayal, abandoning spouses and children, and divorces over asset division have become alarmingly common. The roles of wife and mother, once deeply valued, have steadily diminished in importance. The idea of economic independence within this ideology often translates to prioritizing money above all else. Love follows money, and wealth takes precedence over genuine relationships. This mindset has led some women to play with the emotions of men who truly love them, while they, in turn, chase men who play with their own emotions. Caught in this endless cycle of playing and being played, many ultimately find themselves as older single women. A heartbreaking reality is that they relentlessly pursue men with high social and financial status, even when they know the relationship has no future, convincing themselves otherwise. Meanwhile, men with more modest circumstances aren't even considered, they're relegated to the pool of backup options, at best seen as temporary placeholders or spare tires. It's not that these women don't want to marry, it's that the men they deem acceptable are unwilling to marry them. This misalignment between expectations and reality often leaves these women caught in a loop, ultimately aging into solitude as they struggle to find someone who meets their standards. So, what are your thoughts on the reality of over 100 million single women? Share your perspective in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think.
Today's topic is about the phenomenon of older single women who are both average and overly confident, with expectations that far exceed their actual value. This has come to be known as the ordinary yet arrogant type. These women often overestimate their own worth while setting standards for a partner that are far above what they themselves bring to the table. Many men assume that as women get older and remain single, their standards will naturally lower. However, the reality is quite the opposite. The older a single woman gets, the higher her expectations tend to become. This often results in perfectly eligible men being rejected during matchmaking, leaving these men confused and frustrated. The truth is, most older single women fall into the category of being ordinary. They tend to overvalue themselves, which leads them to undervalue potential partners. This mismatch in expectations is exactly what causes them to miss out on good opportunities and eventually become labeled as leftover women. So, to the men out there, don't question your own worth just because an older single woman turns you down. Most men tend to have a more realistic and accurate evaluation of their own qualities. If you find yourself dealing with an older single woman who's overly picky, feel free to tell her, "You're right, I'm not a match for you," and move on with confidence. Don't let these experiences shake your self-esteem. In short, many older single women have high expectations but lack the ability to meet those same standards. If they weren't so unrealistic, they wouldn't have ended up as older single women in the first place. I hope this perspective sheds some light on the situation.
Are older single women unable to get married because their standards are too high? Are their expectations genuinely unrealistic? I know saying this might cost me some followers, and many older single women might unfollow me, but I still feel the need to speak my mind. What I'm about to say might sound harsh, but it's rooted in reality. Older single women, especially those who are well-educated, financially stable, and career-driven, often have very high expectations. Their criteria for a potential partner are undeniably demanding. They look for men who are not only good-looking, well-educated, mature, and responsible but who also share their values. These are, of course, qualities most women hope for in a partner. However, what truly stands out is their exceptionally high expectations when it comes to a man's financial status. Recently, I had a few women followers from Xi'an reach out to me, asking if I could introduce them to men earning over 300,000 yuan a year for marriage. At first, this didn't seem unreasonable. A man with an annual income of 300,000 yuan, along with a house, a car, and no loans, should theoretically be a good match for respectable women with similar qualities. After all, these women also come from clean, respectable family backgrounds. That seemed fair on paper. But when they sent me their photos and I had deeper conversations with them, it became clear that their self-assessment was completely out of touch with reality. Their expectations were wildly mismatched. What were they like? Around 1.6 meters tall, out of shape, with appearances and styles that couldn't hold a candle to women in their 20s. They weren't fashionable or polished. On top of that, many of these women, whether due to lack of experience or limited exposure in professional settings, couldn't even introduce themselves succinctly. When I asked for a brief self-introduction and a short list of their partner preferences, they sent me long, rambling essays, thousands of words that failed to provide a clear or cohesive profile. I was left scratching my head, wondering, these are the communication skills of women in their 30s? For some perspective, back in 2020 when I was working in the corporate world, a senior manager in his 40s at my office earned about 13,000 yuan per month. With bonuses, his annual income barely exceeded 200,000 yuan. A department supervisor was making around 8,000 yuan a month, which added up to an annual income of roughly 100,000 yuan. And mind you, this was a supervisor managing a team of 60 people at a company with over 1,000 employees. When I pieced everything together and thought about it, it became clear that these older single women's expectations were indeed far too high. They seem to be influenced by toxic motivational stories about ugly ducklings transforming into swans. They spend their days scrolling through platforms like TikTok, watching people talk about finding tall, rich, and handsome men making 1,000,000 yuan a year. Then they convince themselves they're being reasonable by lowering the bar a bit. I'll just settle for someone earning 300,000 yuan a year. That's modest, isn't it? But what they fail to realize is that men earning 300,000 yuan annually are relatively rare, and those men have very specific preferences of their own. So, what kind of women do these high-earning men typically prefer? They're drawn to women who strike a balance between emotional intelligence and rationality, women who are stylish, polished, and can turn heads when walking into a room. These men look for women who either embody the youthful energy and beauty of someone younger or exude the elegance and grace of a mature, confident woman. What they're not looking for is an older single woman who appears unkempt, struggles to find flattering clothes at the mall, skips makeup entirely, and lacks basic social skills. I understand that older single women face a lot of pressure, and many of them are fiercely independent and strong-willed. Because of this, they often deprioritize their appearance. However, the harsh truth is that, as a woman, taking care of your looks is not just about vanity. It's a responsibility to yourself and one of your greatest assets when it comes to attracting men. Don't dismiss men as shallow. Humans, by nature, are wired to be superficial in certain ways. Men are visual creatures, just as women are often drawn to emotional security or financial stability. Let's be real, if a man had no money, would you date him out of pity? Probably not. It works the same way with men, they are largely driven by what they see. A man may fall in love with a woman's personality, but only after her appearance catches his attention. Looks are the hook, and personality is what keeps him there. It doesn't work the other way around. If a woman's external appearance doesn't appeal to a man, he's unlikely to put in the effort to discover her amazing personality. In today's appearance-focused world, no man is going to bypass the visual to look for the substance beneath. And no matter how great or fascinating your personality may be, it simply can't compete with even a mildly attractive appearance.
Sometimes, I just want to throw my hands up and say, how does anyone stay sane at work? Every time I deal with a female client over 35, I feel this wave of dread wash over me. It's enough to make anyone lose their mind. Take this past March, for example, there was this one client from Shanghai, born in 1989, 35 years old, about 1.55 meters tall, working as a nurse at a private hospital, with an annual income in the tens of thousands. When I asked about her preferences, she told me she didn't have too many. Just someone with similar circumstances as hers. She said, an ordinary person would do. But then, what happened? I introduced her to more than 10 men, and she managed to find something wrong with every single one of them. One wasn't handsome enough, another wasn't tall enough, one had siblings, and another's family background wasn't good enough. Watching her nitpick through the list was absolutely exhausting. Eventually, I couldn't hold back anymore and said, let's not waste more time. Why don't you be more specific about your requirements? Things like age, height, profession. Anything concrete. That way, I can recommend someone who actually fits what you're looking for. She finally realized she was dragging things out and started listing her expectations. As far as looks, height, and weight go, I hope the man is at least 1.8 meters tall because I'm so short. I have to think about genetics for my future kids. I don't want someone overweight, but he shouldn't be too skinny either. Handsome isn't a must, as long as he suits my taste. But honestly, some of the ones you introduced earlier. I mean, a few were just too unattractive. The moment I saw them, I couldn't even bring myself to learn anything more about them. Hearing all this, I was already at a loss for words. Meanwhile, she was absolutely brimming with energy, her eyes practically sparkling with anticipation as she watched me closely, like she was afraid I'd miss even the tiniest detail. All I could do was force an awkward smile, nod, and keep listening. She continued, when it comes to income, I'm doing quite well, my job is stable, with great prospects for advancement. So, I'd like the man to earn at least as much as I do, ideally 20,000 yuan a month or more. And I'd prefer someone in the public sector, since that offers stability. Next, about family background, I'm only interested in men from Shanghai. I really don't like guys who have siblings. First, it's too complicated, and second, parents from those families usually can't provide much support. A house and car are, of course, non-negotiable. If there's sibling drama over things like inheritance, I'd absolutely lose my mind. Just as I thought she was finally wrapping up and was about to respond, she cut me off again. Oh, and I can't accept men who are significantly older than me. If a guy is still single at that age, there's got to be something wrong with him. No matter how good his situation might be, I won't even consider it. Also, personality is really important. I need someone outgoing and positive, with high emotional and intellectual intelligence. That's just the bare minimum. She kept going, and honestly, my head was spinning. Desperate to find some clarity, I asked, out of all these requirements, are there a few that are the most crucial? Can we maybe narrow them down a bit? She looked at me, confused, and said, aren't all of these the basic requirements already? At that point, I was completely exasperated. Men who meet her criteria. Of course, they exist. But do you think men like that are short on options? Would they actually choose a 35-year-old woman with average looks? Men with those credentials have their pick of younger, more attractive women, so why would they choose her? And when compared to those younger, prettier women, what does she even bring to the table that sets her apart? I tried reasoning with her for what felt like forever, but she just wouldn't budge. Her mother even went as far as adding me as a contact, pleading with me to talk some sense into her daughter because she wouldn't listen to her family anymore. Whenever her relatives or friends introduced her to someone, not only would she reject them outright, but she'd also lash out at her relatives, accusing them of being out to sabotage her. What could I do? If she wouldn't listen to her own family, did I really stand a chance? I worked tirelessly, explaining things to her, recommending one man after another, but not a single one made the cut. From March until now, 4 months, not one person met her impossible standards. I suggested she consider lowering her expectations and at least giving some of these men a chance, but she flat out refused, convinced that her perfect Prince Charming was just around the corner. As time went on and we became more familiar, I began to be more blunt with her. Every time, I told her directly, if you don't lower your standards and keep being this picky, it's only going to get harder to find someone. As you get older, people will start to assume you can't have children, and your options will shrink to the remarriage market. Furious, she shot back, I've never been married, why should I settle for divorced men in the remarriage market? This is just how the matchmaking market works. No matter how much I explain it, she refuses to listen. By the time a woman is 27 or 28, there are so many others who meet the same criteria as she's looking for, so why would a man pick someone in their 30s? Yet, as expected, she completely ignored my advice and kept messaging me every few days, asking for new profiles. And every time, like clockwork, she'd reject them, nitpicking something about every single man. At this point, even seeing her name pop up on my phone gives me anxiety. And it's not just her. I've got another client, a 33-year-old hopeless romantic, who's equally exhausting. She's fixated on finding love at first sight. If she doesn't feel some magical spark right away, she dismisses the guy on the spot, saying he's not the one. I've been going back and forth with her forever, trying to make her see reason, but it's like talking to a wall. I'm completely drained. Sometimes, I just want to scream this to the world, to all the picky, older single women out there, please, I'm begging you, stop chasing the fantasy of Prince Charming. Think about it, back when you were in college or freshly out of school, at your youngest and most attractive, the men you're dreaming of now probably didn't even notice you. So why on earth do you think they'd choose you now?